Right. Well, and even one of our generals, General McChrystal, and this is something I've always thought about, he said that each innocent killed equals 10 more enemies. And so to me, it's like we're supposedly going after terrorists, but especially with these drone attacks and other air raids, I mean, you kill one supposed terrorist and you kill a dozen civilians, and all those civilians have family members that are all going to be infuriated, filled with hatred, and potentially want to engage in terrorist activity, and it's to me it's just really nuts. It seems like we're creating terrorism. And
it is. It really is. This is an interesting point you bring up, because I just rode down to Dallas for an EPA hearing on coal ash, and it just so happens one of the people in the vehicle was a drone operator in the Arkansas Air National Guard. Right. So we got to talk a whole lot about what he was doing over there and what he was watching.
So can't they like drop bombs from in America, like at Langley, the CIA?
Yeah, he never went over there.
Right.
He was in the U.S. the whole time, but he was monitoring activity, kind of relaying the order of battle is basically what he was breaking it down to. But the really interesting thing was that I started talking to him about the culture over there and how it's kind of a culture of resistance and, kind of what they do on a day-to-day life. And about 5 minutes into that, he was like, I never was exposed to any of that. Right. I don't understand anything about their culture. I didn't know any of that, and that's because I sat over here the whole time. So it was a pretty intense conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny quote too. This Times Square bomber. I don't know if you guys remember him. Just recently, that guy was trying to plant a bomb in Times Square or whatever. He was being tried, and he actually quoted the drone attacks and the killing of civilians as his motivation for wanting to attack American civilians. And he said, like, when the court asked him sort of, don't you realize that your bomb could kill innocent women and children, he responded by saying, the U.S. drone hits in Afghanistan and Iraq don't see children. They kill women, they kill children, they kill everybody. And so, I mean, it's just amazing to me that, and with the drones, it's just this disconnect kind of, where you're not connected to the people that you're killing. You don't see the faces of the people you're killing. You're pushing a button from thousands of miles away, and all you see is, just this image on a screen. You don't never see these faces of children.
There's not a lot of difference between playing Halo and flying one of these drones. I've talked to a few of the operators too. It's really impersonal and it's really inhumane.
Exactly.
I've heard they design the remote controls exactly like video games.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That some of the contractors are some of the same people that do design that, and there's probably a deeper reason for that.
Why there's so many militaristic video games.
Yeah, and the thing is, we'll hit one terrorist, and then there will be a dozen more terrorists that they can recruit through family members or tribal associations or any of these connections. And then what we need to realize is when we're killing one person and there's one possibly more being created, that's a cycle that we are perpetuating through our violence.
Yeah.
So then you can't really, that's a no-win situation. So what do we do to try to win it? We want to send more troops in, and then we're gonna send more firepower into this cycle, but it's just the wheel's gonna turn faster. Yeah. And then there's gonna be more recruiting, and it's just a no-win situation.
Well, it's interesting. Just since Obama's surge, I guess when he came in, there was 30,000 troops. Now there's about 100,000 in Afghanistan, and we've seen the level of violence going up and the level of deaths going up. General Petraeus said that there's a sign that we're sort of winning the war, whatever winning means, and he's saying that IED attacks have flattened, but that's not true. There's actually more bombs and more killing of U.S. and NATO troops by IEDs this year than previous year. Actually, 40% more troops killed the first 8 months of this year compared to the same period last year. And that over 2,025 wounded, which is almost double last year. And 900 IED attacks a month compared to 250 a month last year.
Yeah, that's what you get when you send more troops over there.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation between a rise in civilian casualties and a rise in U.S. troops on the ground. And that's because when you put more U.S. troops on the ground, you have more people affiliated with the anti-occupation movement. And like you were saying, the first 8 months this year yielded 2,025 deaths. Last year was only 1,035 for this 8 months.
I think that may have been wounded. In Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I have a statistic that says 331 dead in the first 8 months of this year, compared to only 317 dead of all of last year.
Yeah, it is wounded.
So,
spoke.
Yeah. So. certainly we're seeing the wounded and the dead increasing. I mean, and we're supposed to be, you know.
Yeah, and then a lot of the
think
people,
that adding more, their logic is adding more troops is going to create more security. But
That's not the case.
Yeah, I can almost hear in my mind a lot of mainstream everyday Americans saying, yeah, but we'd rather fight them over there than fight them over here. And I would encourage anyone who happens to be thinking that right now, I'm sure there would be a few people, to go ahead and look into the history of what has led to the divide, or really the injuring of the relations between the people in the Middle East and over here. This is a historical thing, and we need to go back, because we could talk about casualties all day long, and there's still going to be that brand of person, just the everyday American, that's going to say, yeah, well, that's just how war is. That's just how it needs to be.
Well,
but they have to look deeper into historically.
It seems like public opinion is kind of definitely shifting against the war, especially with the WikiLeaks thing. And then, I mean, a recent CNN poll said 2/3 of the public says we're not winning the war, and 50% say it's unwinnable. So, I mean, whatever winning means, I just hate that term.
Yeah,
winning. I mean,
there's no win.
There's only one way to win this war, and that's to leave.
Yeah.
The second we admit that we have failed, that this is a failed occupation, and that we're going to pull everyone out and look at nation rebuilding instead of using the military to do something that is not built to do, we actually win. But until that point, we are going to lose every single day.
I thought there was an interesting quote I just bumped into. I was doing some research before the show. Actually, Henry Kissinger, you know, a big warmonger of the Vietnam era, he actually said Afghanistan has never been pacified by foreign forces, and waging a lengthy counterinsurgency war there may do more to aid Taliban recruiting than dismantle the group. And it spread conflict further into Pakistan, unify radical groups there that otherwise wouldn't be unified, and threaten the long-term health of the U.S. economy and prevent the U.S. government from turning full attention to other pressing problems. So we're even having, like, you know, seemingly right-wing kind of, you know, war hawks, you know, criticizing the current Afghanistan policy. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I think the tide may be turning on it. I don't know, but it seems like the Obama administration's kind of entrenched in a position of kind of, I don't know.
There's a lot of money in play.
Money in place, yeah.
A lot of money at play here. I mean, they're trying to, and these video game controllers for the drone operators, that's kind of a really telling example, I think. But they're almost dehumanizing these Taliban insurgents, these indigenous peoples over there, into like weeds popping up. And when you look at that, you know, who's making money off of the fertilizer that we're using here to spray weeds? Well, you know, a lot of these pesticide, or you know, a lot of these anti-weed agent producing people. So similarly, who's making money off of selling these bombs that are blowing up these people? The people that are making this money are some of the same people that are controlling our media outlets. And that's just, that's the biggest, we talk about that a lot, Jake and I do on the road, is that the media is really selling this war to the American people.
Well, I mean, and we know that, like, General Electric, for instance, owns NBC, and they also make jet engines for our war machines. I mean, so there's so many clear conflicts of interest that go against every notion of you know, journalistic ethics that used to exist, sort of. And it's pretty astounding, really. If you think about that, I don't know.
Yeah, and if we end the war and then stock prices across the board, or at least a lot of stock prices fall, will that be worth it? I mean, it's rhetorical, but you know, like, that's what people need to get to thinking about.
And it's, you know, you brought up the drones again, and I was listening to someone talk about observing something on the ground and determining to drop a bomb off of that. And basically, they'd watched a group of people do something, and then they went and they were doing it peacefully. It was a peaceful gathering. They went somewhere else and launched a mortar. So they decided to bomb them. Well, I can tell you, while I was over there, there was weapons all over the ground. They're everywhere, because when the Soviets left the country, they just left everything instead of dragging it all out of there. So everyone has access to these type of weapons. And just because someone's launching a mortar off doesn't mean they're affiliated with any organization that's against the U.S. government or against the U.S. military being in country. But they went ahead and blowed them up anyway, you know, because they were launching weapons. But the thing is, those things are everywhere. And it could have been a 12-year-old kid goofing off, for all we know. But again, that's kind of the detachment that comes from using drones to target these situations instead of using units on the ground to identify them.
Right.